Now our next topic from the same lesson, French Revolution, is the rise of Napoleon, the abolition of slavery, and what did the revolution give to the world. These are the three topics that we will learn in the last part of the lesson, of which the legacy of the revolution is more important. We will see that. The first is the abolition of slavery. Adding to the misery of the people of France, other than all the problems that existed, there was this big problem of slavery also in France. The peasants, they were kept as bonded laborers and made to work very hard on the farms of the others. So let's see what is it, how did they try to get out of it. In France, they needed bonded laborers, which we call as slaves, to work in the plantations and in the colonies held by them. The Europeans, the others, they were not ready to travel far and work in the plantations. So there was shortage of labor. To meet this shortage of labor, a triangular slave trade system was set up between countries of Europe, Africa and West Indies. A triangular slave trade system between Europe, Africa and West Indies. The triangular slave trade system began in the 17th century when French merchants sailed to African coasts and bought slaves from the local chiefs. And these people were shipped to the islands of Caribbean, to the Caribbean islands across the Atlantic, where they were sold to plantations who used them to meet the growing demands of the laborers. There was shortage of labor, so the plantations of sugar, coffee and indigo plantations needed laborers. So these laborers bought from Africa, from the local chiefs, were sold to these plantations and they were asked to work in sugar, coffee and indigo plantations. So the two port cities, Bordeaux and Nantes, they prospered due to the flourishing slave trade. Actually, slavery is not something good, is it not? Forcing people to work for long hours, they were not paid well, they were not given proper living conditions. So it was a real misery for them. It took long years to bring an end to this system of slavery. It was abolished in France by the Constitution of 1791. By the Constitution of 1791, slavery was put to an end, but it was not granted to all people of France, including those people in the colonies. In 1794, when the Convention government came, that is the Jacobean regime coming to rule, they abolished slavery in French colonies also. But 10 years after, when Napoleon came to power, he reintroduced the system. And it was by the year 1848 that slavery was finally abolished in France. It's a very small topic. It's nothing much important to discuss and explain. The next is the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. As I had already mentioned, Napoleon Bonaparte was a military dictator, a military chief. And he came to power soon after the fall of the Directory in 1796. He came to power in the year 1796. After the fall of the Directory in 1796. In 1804, he crowned himself as the Emperor of France. He was a very excellent general He recovered the lost territories of France, expanded his kingdom by waging wars with the kings of Russia, Prussia and Austria. All what they had took over, territories that were captured by these kings were taken back by Napoleon Bonaparte, and he expanded his territory. Many of the people called him as the modernizer of Europe. He changed many things. He implemented many reforms, like he stopped inflation through bringing in new financial reforms. He introduced many land reforms, and then he brought in this Napoleonic Code, the Civil Code of 1804. This was introduced by him, and this acted as the base for the legal system of France in future. He was able to control prices of essential goods, encourage new industries, promote public schools, etc. So these citizen-friendly measures of Napoleon made him very popular among the people of France, and he was seen as a liberator who could bring freedom to his people. So he was considered as a modernizer, he was considered as a liberator who could bring freedom to people. And he brought, even though he was single-handedly ruling, he was a bit harsh and strict. Even then, he introduced many good policies for the people of France. He wanted to change France. So he brought in the Napoleonic Code, the Civil Code, then he brought in new land reforms, new financial reforms, controlled prices, started new schools, encouraged industrialization, and he was trying to bring about changes in France and modernize the country and its people. The next is the legacy of the revolution. What did French Revolution give to the world, leave behind? So, the French Revolution gave the world, what did these people fight for? Equality, freedom, fraternity. So, in the end, the people gained that. It gave the world the three main ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity. And it preached the concept of equal rights for all citizens, which later became the concept of equality before law for all people. It tried to spread the idea of love, unity and cooperation among different sections of the society. Many of the democratic rights that we enjoy today are the results of French Revolution. It inspired in the minds of the people the spirit of democracy. That is, it emphasized that the government should not only be for the people but by the people. Democracy is that, is it not? It is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. It should stand for the people. It should be made by the people. Then the right to equality. That is one of the main principles of democracy, which will give its citizens, the country's citizens, social, economic and political equalities. Right to expression of speech, of freedom of expression and speech. They should be allowed to criticize the government, speak against the wrong policies of the government, able to change rulers if they want, and they should be able to think freely. There should be freedom for press. So these democratic ideas, like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom for the press, that government should stand for the people and at the same time it should be made by the people. There should be love, there should be unity and cooperation among the different kinds of people that live together in a nation. Equal rights should be there. There should be liberty. There should be brotherhood, fraternity. So all this is part of democracy. So from this, what do we understand? Well, we try to discuss about the legacy of the revolution, that France, even though it went for long years, it faced difficult times for a long number of years. In the end, the people succeeded in having a government made by themselves for themselves, with their representatives working on their behalf. The people learned to remain united. The people learned to think freely and bring out new ideas and shape their opinions and views for the welfare of themselves and for the development of the country. Election will be conducted, giving voting rights to all eligible, and thus they find their representatives. This is what remains in history, along with how it was fought by the French, that is the French Revolution. So right from a society where there was a single ruler who used to keep all his subjects under his total control, how he was forced to give up his power and be under the control of these people, and later how he was put to death. And there was a new bright day for France and its people when they got control of their own country and they together worked for the total development of the country. So these democratic ideas that was given out to the world, for our country India, we had two leaders, Tipu Sultan and Raja Mohan Roy, who responded to these ideas that came from revolutionary France. And later, these ideas were incorporated into our constitution also. India, being a democratic country, has a constitution, it is a republic country, and all what we learned about the democratic principles exist to at least to a smaller extent in our country also, which we got from France and its revolutionary minded people. Understood? This is what French Revolution is all about. It's society, the difficulties people faced and how they overcome these difficulties and won their need of having a government of themselves. Yes? Good. You have understood well the lesson.